Good night. Welcome to Shorts Review, where we talk about all things in the 242 and a few things from around the world. Tonight is a special episode about the Bahamas blue carbon credit. Now, we've been hearing about these carbon credits for a while now, and the reason why I decided to talk about it now is because I myself don't fully understand what carbon credits is, how it works, what benefits I get, what the perks are. All I hearing about is all these billions of dollars we're supposed to be getting, if it was to go through the sovereign wealth fund or something like that. So tonight, if there are others like myself out there who wants to fully understand about the carbon credits and how they work, you're going to go through it with me tonight so we can fully understand what it's all about. The reason why I decided to take it serious and look into it is because Lincoln being entire campaign was all about this, carbon credit and what he'd be able to do in terms of getting it sorted out for the Bahamian people. Now this has been, going on for quite a while, even before Lincoln being, but he pushed it. So first of all, we want to know, what is carbon credit? So I'm going to play a video for you, what I watched myself, and see if you can understand by these videos what carbon credit is and how it can benefit you in some way or form.
What is carbon credit? A carbon credit is a permit that a company buys. This permit lets the company make a set amount of carbon dioxide or other greenhouse gas. Each credit gives them permission to release 1 ton of harmful gas into the environment. That's the same amount of carbon that you might produce by driving a car for 2,400 miles. The goal of carbon credits is to reward companies for reducing their greenhouse gas emissions. These companies have to pay for a carbon credit if they make more harmful gases than they are allowed. Some companies succeed in staying below the limits. Then they sell their carbon credit to another company. This way, there's an opportunity for companies to make money by reducing their emissions. How do I get carbon credits? There are several ways to get carbon credits. One way is by leading a project that pulls greenhouse gas out of the air or lowers the number of emissions. You earn 1 carbon credit by destroying or preventing 1 ton of greenhouse gas emissions. Examples of such projects are training people in the Amazon on how to save the rainforest or protecting forests from logging. You can also buy carbon credits directly from a safe marketplace, such as Native Energy, TerraPass, or South Pole. How much is carbon credit worth? The cost of a carbon credit differs depending on what kind of project you're doing. In general, their value goes up with time. For example, in 2019, it cost $4.33 to buy forest and land use credits. By 2021, the price was $4.73 per credit. Part of the reason for the higher price is that fewer carbon credits are available over time. Basically, the supply of carbon credits is limited. What are carbon credits in agriculture? Farmers earn carbon credits by using sustainable methods in farming. One example is planting cover crops. These are crops that slow down the loss of soil and make the soil healthier. Another sustainable practice is to lessen the amount of tilling. Tilling is turning the soil over. Tilling causes soil to blow in the wind or lose nutrition. If farmers show they use sustainable farming practices, they earn carbon credits. Carbon credit sellers. In most cases, carbon credit sellers are individuals or organizations that want to invest in projects that reduce carbon emissions. They make money by selling carbon credits to farmers or companies. Sometimes a farmer might decide to sell carbon credits as a way to earn extra money. In addition, companies may opt to sell carbon credits to customers who want to reduce their carbon footprint. Carbon credit investors. Carbon credits keep increasing in value. So, there is an opportunity to make a profit by investing in them. Individuals can start investment funds for this purpose. They can also invest in companies that trade carbon credits. Some companies include Microsoft or Shell. Some companies use carbon credits to reduce emissions. Others trade them to make money. Overall, carbon credits are an interesting way to earn money and help the environment at the same time.
You've probably heard the terms carbon credits. A carbon credit is a unit corresponding to the avoidance or removal of 1 ton of CO2 from our atmosphere. The credits are issued by climate action projects that capture carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, for example, by planting trees, or prevent carbon from being emitted, for example, by stopping deforestation or replacing open fires with efficient cook stoves. The number of credits generated by a project is based on the tons of CO2 it saves. To guarantee that the impacts being made by a project are happening, our carbon credits are certified according to recognized international standards. These standards provide strict methodologies to calculate impacts, a harmonized auditing framework, and regularly monitor projects. They also ensure that the climate projects are well implemented, that they could not have been developed without the revenue from carbon credits, and that they create measurable and permanent climate benefits. Once issued, each credit is assigned a unique identifier and registered in publicly available registries to ensure that it can only be counted and sold once. In the fight against climate change, carbon credits are a proven way for companies to reduce global emissions today, while they work hard to shrink their own carbon footprint. These investments support sustainable development in the countries most threatened by climate change and scale pioneering new climate solutions.
Let us break down for you how this all works. Every time an organization uses a resource that relies on burning fossil fuels, it creates carbon emissions, also known as a carbon footprint. Everybody has a carbon footprint. But when these emissions enter the atmosphere, they accelerate climate change, bringing, among other things, more extreme weather. Thankfully, the plummeting costs of low-carbon technologies and more resource-efficient practices mean that many organizations are reducing their footprints, becoming more resilient, and saving on energy expenditure. But reducing emissions is challenging, something that doesn't happen overnight. And with our present systems of energy and land use, preventing any carbon dioxide emissions is not currently possible for most organizations. This is where carbon credits come in. Buying carbon credits compensates for the unavoidable emissions you create today by financing projects that reduce or absorb carbon emissions anywhere in the world. Carbon credits increase the health and prosperity of communities around the world and combat climate change by financing projects. Projects that reduce the need to burn fossil fuels or draw greenhouse gases directly out of the air. Accreditations from internationally recognized standards give you the assurance that the projects producing your credits deliver the positive environmental and social impacts they set out to achieve. Moreover, your credits help finance projects that would not otherwise happen. So as well as offsetting your emissions, you are also supporting more sustainable forms of growth.
So as you can see, smoke exhaust from buses and cars and factories like RBPL, factories, they are like carbon emissions, forms of them are carbon dioxide and carbon monoxide, as you heard from the video. And by saving 1 ton of carbon emission from entering the atmosphere, that's equal to 1 carbon credit. So you could sell or buy or trade, however, the carbon emissions, is dished out or by whatever source you use or resources that you use. So as you can see, some forms that people use is like trees, mainly, planting trees. That's like the main thing. But we in the Bahamas have something else. We have our beautiful waters, which stores something called seagrass. And that helps benefits the marine ecosystem. So much so that it absorbs more carbon than the entire Amazon rainforest. That's correct. The entire Amazon rainforest.
My name is Dr. Austin Gallagher. I am the founder and CEO of Beneath the Waves, and I've been involved in scientific research in the Atlantic Ocean and the Caribbean for over 10 years. A large focus of these efforts have been in the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, which has really become almost a second home for our organization and also for me personally. We were doing a lot of tracking and monitoring of sharks throughout the entire Bahamas archipelago. It's a huge ocean space. One of the things that we learned was that tiger sharks actually spent significantly more time in areas where there were seagrass meadows. This was really when we started understanding the true value of habitat, and if you want to protect species like sharks, it really starts with the habitat. And I remember very distinctly having a conversation with one of my colleagues and a scientific advisor at Beneath the Waves, Dr. Carlos Duarte. One of our first conversations, I was sharing some of the updates of our work with him over a Zoom call, and I actually showed him some of these camera tag videos, and he proclaimed to me that this might have been a more significant discovery than we actually thought it was.
Many years ago, about maybe 25 years ago, I flew from Spain to Miami, and I flew over the Bahamas banks. And I was really impressed from what I saw through the window of the plane, that amazing turquoise space and huge area that all was suitable to support ecosystems like seagrass meadows, but yet no one had been working on seagrass meadows. So when I met Austin Gallagher, then we immediately discussed about the importance of seagrass meadows as a foundational ecosystem and the need to be able to quantify the area of seagrass in this amazing ecosystem. The Bahamas banks is such a huge environment that is impossible to cover by human divers. So bringing together the sharks and seagrass, we instrumented sharks for the first time with 360-degree cameras. So the tiger sharks have actually been scouting the Bahamas banks for us.
At this point, we knew what we had to do. We took a remote sensing approach, and we utilized experts who harvested satellite data, and we mapped out the spatial extent of the seagrass meadows on the Bahama banks, ultimately revealing a huge number, up to 93,000 square kilometers, making this by far the world's largest seagrass meadow.
It's a remarkable demonstration of how little we still know about the ocean. It's a call for action that we really need to invest more in exploring the oceans, and that indeed exploration, there can be major benefits and understanding. So now we understand what supports the ecosystem in the Bahamas bank that is so vibrant, but also how important the blue carbon stock in this seagrass meadow is, which is the largest blue carbon stock asset anywhere in the ocean. So for humanity, it means that the ocean is probably healthier than we might believe, because we are usually bombarded with negative headlines about the bad state of the ocean. So it brings us hope, but it also brings us a new tool to be able to elicit climate action. By conserving and restoring the areas of this seagrass meadow, we can definitely contribute to climate mitigation.
It's also really powerful to think about what this discovery means, because sharks have been protected in the Bahamas, and we now know that the seagrass meadow can really have very large ecosystem services and economic benefits for the people of the Bahamas. So it's really not too much of a stretch to say that if you protect the sharks, you can protect the humans.
Yeah, so by using the seagrass, this is what we're supposed to use as our way of saving the planet from carbon emissions. That's the gist of what I get from what carbon credits is. I hope I was able to assist you in trying to find out what it is, because I'm just trying my best to understand it myself. But as we look in further, we want to know, how do we benefit from these carbon credits? Well, we had many people trying to explain it and to understand it. One person by the name of Ricardo Thurston have been trying to educate the Bahamian people for quite a while now. He's been on a show called Hard Copy with, I think that's Mr. McKinney. And you can hear what he has to say about it.
Tell them what Ricardo should say. Go Google the university / seagrass and see how much the white people say the Danes wait and how much they can pay for it.
For the record, seems like Mr. Thurston is organizing this himself. That's why he gave her this number, and that's why he talk about support. This ain't but no colors. This ain't but no PLP party. This ain't but no F&M party. This ain't but no COI party. This is a clarion call for all Bahamians. Leave your colors home.
The government with less than 39% of the vote.
Very true.
That's not a mandate to govern. What brand are you talking about? That election that just happened in West End and Grand Bahama, more than 2,000 voters didn't show up to vote in that election. What brand are you talking about?
That's the brand what they're talking about. I'm not saying I agree with the brand.
So they're creating a narrative.
That's what they're doing.
That doesn't bear out with the numbers. The narrative that they're creating and the numbers don't add up.
It's false.
So when you want to engage in this conversation, let's start with the numbers. Because the numbers create the narrative. The narrative don't create the numbers. Narrative don't vote, people vote. The fact of the matter is, the PLP is not a brand. If they were a brand, they would have gotten more than 50% of the vote in the last general election. They did not.
So somebody said. That's what somebody said.
They did not. So how you could be walking around here with your chest stick out like, oh, you got a mandate from the people and all that? The majority of people didn't vote for you.
Very true. There was something on that today on the internet. People are saying that they don't have a mandate to govern.
They don't have a mandate to govern. Now, there's a lot of money floating around, so people are endeared to this narrative because it's beneficial to them.
Absolutely.
So you always got to watch the people who are promulgating these narratives.
Thanks for telling me that.
This is going to go down in history if Bahamians, who are upset with what's going on with our carbon credits, just sit back idly and do nothing with all the information what has been putting out in the public domain, knowing this is correct about our carbon credits. And Bahamians allow themselves to be a pawn in a chess game because they can't come together because it's going against their party. If all the information is accurate and we don't stand for our country, we really deserve whatever we get, nothing.
So as you can see, before Lincoln being, there were many people that came to try to form a group called the Bahamas National Resources Foundation. This was the way in which we were supposed to benefit from it in the form of a sovereign wealth fund. But as you will see further, I don't think that's in place anymore. But we'll save that for later on in the show. So Ricardo Thurston been trying to explain that, we need to fight for what is rightfully ours. Because if we leave it in the hands of the government, we may not see a dime from that. So I think I am starting to get the gist of it, but let's look into it further. Let's see, should we trust it? As you know, everything has loopholes and even scams. Let's listen to this YouTuber and see what she discovered as to what certain countries and companies were involved in with this carbon credit scandal.
Carbon credits are a way to reduce our carbon emissions and our carbon footprint to ensure a more sustainable planet for future generations. One carbon credit is a permit that allows the owner to emit 1 ton of carbon dioxide or other greenhouse gases without it contributing to their overall carbon footprint. Just like with most ideas, carbon credits started off with honest intentions, but loopholes have turned it into a bookkeeping trick. Credits can be a greenwashing tactic that allow companies to mislead customers without making any improvements to their business model. Researching carbon credits and offsets for this video was a shocking and eye-opening experience. There seems to be no limits to the corruption and fraudulent schemes in the carbon credit market. There are two broad types of carbon markets. The first is a mandatory cap-and-trade program. Governments set a limit or cap on the emissions permitted across a certain industry. If a company goes over their allowance, they can buy more carbon credits from their market to continue emitting gases. They may also be penalized for a violation. However, if a company reduces their emissions, they can sell or trade carbon credits to other companies. The cap and trade program provides private companies two incentives to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. They must spend money on extra credits if their emissions exceed the limit. They can also make money by reducing their emissions and selling excess credits. The second type of carbon market is the voluntary offset program. This allows businesses, nonprofits, and individuals to offset their emissions by choice. Businesses can create and sell carbon credits by reducing, capturing, and storing emissions through different projects, such as investing in renewable energy, improving energy efficiency, carbon and methane capture, land reforestation, returning biomass to the soil, and switching to biofuels. A big part of the voluntary offset program is corporate social responsibility. Companies can win over customers by claiming to be green, environmentally friendly, carbon neutral, and net zero. For example, Starbucks uses ethically sourced coffee, they build LEED certified stores, and they are committed to recycling and conserving water and energy. The carbon credit market was created as part of the 1997 Kyoto Protocol. This legally binding international agreement required only developed nations to cut CO2 emissions. It aimed to decrease overall emissions by 5% from 1990 levels. However, UN officials have since confirmed that Russian and Ukrainian oil and gas companies exploited loopholes and actually increased carbon emissions by 600 million tons. Of all the carbon credits or emission reduction units that were issued, nearly 75% of them were bogus and lacked environmental integrity. One example of bogus projects are those that stop the spontaneous ignition of coal. Large piles of coal can self-ignite and burn for several years, emitting carbon dioxide, carbon monoxide, nitrogen oxides, and other poisonous gases. Several Ukrainian coal companies extracted coal from the ground, burned them in power plants, and claimed millions in carbon credits. So, they made money by selling power, they made money by extracting coal from the ground, and all the emissions from burning coal in a power plant aren't counted. A second bogus project is the expansion of natural gas pipelines. Natural gas is considered to be a cleaner fuel than coal or oil, which emit more carbon dioxide. These pipeline projects were also supposed to reduce methane leaks in pipes. Many Ukrainian pipeline projects that were registered in 2012 had already started in 2003, so they weren't preventing emissions. On top of that, the assumed methane leaks were 3 times the real data. They were not as effective as they claimed, and their carbon credits were meaningless. A third bogus project is the treatment of greenhouse gases like chlorofluorocarbons or CFCs and hydrochlorofluorocarbons or HCFCs. In 2011, the Russian government removed extra checks in the carbon crediting process. So, companies deliberately increased their greenhouse gases by 4 times, then captured and destroyed them to claim millions in the carbon credits. Simply put, Russia and Ukraine were gaming the system. They took credit for projects that would have already happened or happened a decade earlier. They overestimated emission reductions and deliberately increased waste gases. Needless to say, these fraudulent projects were exposed and the Kyoto Protocol collapsed. The Paris Agreement of 2015 declared a new set of targets and asked all nations to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, not just developed nations. Its goal is to limit global warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius compared to pre-industrial levels. The Paris Agreement is voluntary and non-binding. It allows nations to set their own emissions goals without legal penalties if they don't meet their targets. The voluntary structure of the deal was deliberate because they were addressing the criticisms and failure of the Kyoto Protocol. The Paris Agreement was supposed to address fraudulent business practices, but companies managed to find greenwashing loopholes. Jim Hordikin, CEO of Lime Timber, recently exposed the fraudulent carbon credit system. in this Bloomberg article by Ben Elgin. His company manages 1.5 million acres of U.S. forests, roughly the size of Delaware. In the past, lime timber made most of its revenue from chopping down trees. In 2012, they began selling carbon credits on 220,000 acres of 15% of its land. They earned $53 million from these environmental transactions over the past 2 years. At the risk of losing business, he exposed the flaws in the carbon credit system. For example, his company set aside a portion of forest and protected it from timber harvesting or logging. In addition to being paid for protecting the forest, they could also sell carbon credits on it, which made no sense. The trees were not going to be cut down, so the credits had no impact on the atmosphere. The oil and gas company Chevron purchased more than 20,000 of lime timber's carbon credits, so some of its pollution cuts were fictitious. Lime timber also received $20 million for protecting 47,000 acres of hardwood forest in West Virginia. However, the land was so rugged and steep that the trees could not have been harvested anyway. The carbon credits issued didn't have any benefit to the climate. There are several other examples of carbon credit misuse. Environmental groups such as the Nature Conservancy and the National Audubon Society sold credits for protecting trees that weren't in danger of being harvested. This allowed companies like Walt Disney and JP Morgan Chase, who bought these credits, to make misleading claims of lower emissions. Green Trees, one of North America's largest carbon reforestation projects, sold credits for trees that were already planted through government programs 10 years earlier. This resulted in inflated and meaningless carbon reduction claims by Bank of America. Here's another example of dodgy carbon credits. An oil company, Royal Dutch Shell, delivered a carbon-neutral tanker of LNG, or liquefied natural gas, to Taiwan by investing in 10-year-old forest projects in Ghana, Indonesia, and Peru. In 2020, a French oil company, Total, also delivered its first shipment of carbon-neutral LNG. How can you extract natural gas in Australia, ship it to China, and claim it's carbon neutral? By buying a 10-year-old wind farm in northern China called Hebei. Let's cut through all the BS. There is no such thing as carbon neutral or net zero fossil fuels. A wind farm isn't negating the emissions from burning natural gas. But the flawed carbon credit system allows companies to make such ridiculous, nonsensical claims. Shell has been buying carbon credits from the Kutinin Mintaya project, a 370,000-acre project to protect swamp forests in Indonesia. The project claims to prevent the release of 447 million tons of carbon dioxide over 60 years. It is apparently the world's largest forest-based carbon credit project. Shell and Volkswagen are two of the hundreds of companies that have bought their credits. Greenpeace claims that the credits are an illusion because the forest has been protected by the Indonesian government since 2011. In addition to these greenwashing loopholes, the actual cost of each carbon credit can vary drastically, from less than $1 per ton to over $50 per ton. The cost depends on the effectiveness of the carbon offset project, the location, and additional benefits. For example, Bill Gates spends $600 per ton to negate emissions from his private jet. Microsoft pays an average of $20 per ton. On the lower end, Delta Airlines pays about $2.30 per ton. They spent $30 million on 13 million offsets, so they were able to declare themselves carbon neutral last year. We should be very careful about such claims and question whether carbon credits that cost just $2.30 per ton are actually helping our environment. Most of those programs get millions in funding, can generate carbon credits, and then cut down the trees after 10 years.
There's a lot of this kind of fuzzy area where people are buying carbon credits for things that we don't know if they're really helping the environment at all.
Tackling carbon emissions and climate change is very tricky. Carbon credits are a way to quantify emissions and pollutants, so they are a step in the right direction. But it's very important to identify loopholes, flaws, or scams in the system and address them instead of ignoring them due to the fear of being labeled a climate change denier. Kyle Harrison, the head of sustainability research for Bloomberg NEF, said that the current design of the voluntary carbon market is doomed to fail. We need more insiders like Jim Hordikin to expose the problem with carbon markets. He says that weak rules have created strong incentives for landowners to develop offset projects that don't actually change the way forests are managed and therefore do little to help the climate. His company Lime Timber has decided to only sell carbon credits that genuinely benefit the climate. This has raised the cost of his company's carbon credits to $60, which unfortunately turns many clients away. It's important to balance optimism of climate change initiatives with criticism. We need to be concerned about the misuse of carbon credits because the increased costs to run businesses will eventually trickle down to us, the consumers. We should be concerned about the misuse of taxpayer money and greenwashing tactics.
As you can see, there are many loopholes. But I can't speak on our current government, but the track record shows that our previous governments have all had their hands in the cookie jar at some point in time. And with that being said, anything is liable to happen.
Over the holidays, when all of you guys were out there partying and enjoying Junkanoo, the government passed the National Development Fund Act. They passed the Act for the National Development Fund. That act also repealed the Sovereign Wealth Fund Act, National Development, that the Prime Minister himself and the Minister of Finance, who happen to be the same person, has complete autonomy in terms of decision making.
And that's something.
Now, these acts separately by themselves doesn't constitute the big picture. But when you take a look at these acts in tandem, the big picture emerge. And so you ask the question, what's going on? If the Bahamas had decided to go to the mandatory side of the market, the UN had certain protocols in place. One of those protocols is that the government of the Bahamas would have to set up a sovereign wealth fund, and more than 60% of the proceeds from the carbon credits would have to go into that sovereign wealth fund and be dispersed to the citizens of the country.
See, now that's the big catch. Do you understand? You understand that that big catch means then that because they have done away with the sovereign wealth fund, there is no 60% to put into the sovereign wealth fund.
As you can hear Ricardo Thurston say, Bahamians are likely to be scammed by the government if we let them continue to bypass these carbon credit information.
Before Lincoln Bain came on the scene with Bahamian evolution, citizens came together and form and structure their very own Natural Resources Foundation. This foundation's supposed to be the gatekeeper for the country, to inform and educate the country about our ecosystem and what make up our natural resources. The foundation was formed in a critical time, and they had demands. They demand a Ministry of Natural Resources, so the citizens can be educated about what is a natural resource and the value, and they also demand a sovereign wealth fund so the citizens can benefit from their natural resources. At that time, knowing they will need the numbers to speak with one voice as a body of citizens, they extended their membership to the general public, so the president can speak on behalf of the citizens in the country. They extended their membership drive to get the numbers up.
With 20 to 50,000.
Any government will want to sit with that president. It could have been an easy fix. For the numbers, how many Junkanoo group we have in the Bahamas? If the persons on the board was not just waiting for the members to spread this information, word to mouth, but take the initiative to really put this in the public domain, what's going on now would not be going on because the foundation was already structured. That's why it's good to document what's going on in real time, so the future generations would know the truth about their country. Let me draw an illustration, because no government want the citizens to benefit from the country resources. The FNM say they put a team together what never materialized to nothing. My philosophy is, if you don't see or hear nothing in 9 months games are being played, it take a woman 9 months to bring a baby into the world, and that's a life. But no government would talk to you about your birth inheritance. You have to come together as a people and show the world you're not stupid. Decision-making always comes from the masses of the population, not the government. People around the world want to know, why the citizens don't want to stand up for their own inheritance.
The nation's true wealth are its people and its natural resources. To be established to advocate for full disclosure of all of the natural resources can be and might be exploited for economic gain. Subsequently, deposited into a separate national fund to benefit the citizens of the Bahamas. She will advocate for the establishment of a Ministry of National Resources and the Sovereign Wealth Fund.
Plain and simple, either you stand up for your inheritance, or you don't.
And Bahamians shouldn't get mad if they are not aggressive or hungry enough to make a stand for their country, and others do, like Bob Marley say, get up for your right. But you refuse to stand up, and others do. Who do you blame? You can't blame the persons who stand. You have to blame yourself for not standing. You think coming on WhatsApp voicing your opinion will fix your problems, when others will sacrifice to benefit. So I say this. We all live in our own world, and right now the fruit is ready to be picked by Bahamians. But if Bahamians are too chicken shit to pick their own fruit, and when other Bahamians from a next origin ready to pick their fruit, you Bahamians who ain't into nothing, who is be on these WhatsApp chat crying when this is your opportunity to benefit, but you refuse, that one on you, just like the people in West Grand Bahama. They had the opportunity to talk to the government about their plans for West End. They allow the process, what never worked for them, control the narrative, and what results you think they will get in the future. Remember,
Bahamians.
No one is responsible for you, but you. The natural resources of the Bahamas belongs to every last
Bahamians.
And I feel we all should benefit. The question is the PLP and the FNM,
The Bahamas,
or we the
Bahamian people,
will make up the Bahamas? That is the question.
Insofar as where the fund's going to go, it's going to go for the benefit of the Bahamian people. Yes. Firstly, it'll either go into a sovereign wealth fund or a special purpose vehicle.
March 2018, the Natural Resources Foundation held a press conference stating what the citizens wanted. And before this press conference, the then Prime Minister was Perry Christie, and the Deputy Prime Minister was Philip Edward Davis. They was the ones who give the citizens that Sovereign Wealth Fund Act. That is why the citizens came together to form a foundation, so they can explore, study, and benefit from the country's resources. What is so mind-blowing is after all of this, the citizens structure themselves and advocated for a new ministry and minister, now the Deputy Prime Minister, who is now the Prime Minister. Granted that request, and give the Bahamas a new ministry. Now we have a new ministry of natural resources, thanks to this administration. But this new ministry is supposed to educate and inform the citizens about our natural resources. From this happens social media, being on fire, talking about carbon credits and benefiting hard copy radio talk show, has a gentleman by the name of Ricardo Thurston, who comes on the radio to educate the nation about our carbon credits. Because after this new ministry has been formed, the Bahamas has never had a press statement from the Minister of Natural Resources about what's going on in the public domain. So it is conflicting and confusing. You're hearing this at home and hearing other things overseas. So if you're not paying attention to what's going on, you would be completely lost. Now, this is a recent clip with our Prime Minister on the international platform, telling them the truth, that our carbon credits has values into the billions. The question is, if the Bahamas have inheritance, why can't you receive what is rightfully yours?
Your Excellencies, time has run out. Over the coming 6 months, before the next hurricane season begins, we can use the time to strengthen our National Youth Card. We can also raise more finance using our blue carbon credits, backed by our extensive underwater fields of seagrasses, which absorb more carbon than the Amazon rainforest. We welcome the pledges made in the past 2 days at this COP to the Loss and Damage Fund. Surely, this puts beyond doubt the debate that the principle has now been settled. The polluter pays. But it has taken 30 years to agree that there should be a fund for loss and damage. And in 13 years, we have not yet hit the original pledge goal of $100 billion per year. Original pledge goal of $100 billion per year. So, how long must we now wait to have this new fund catalyzed?
But I just put the video in here speaking about our country process. You know what I'm saying? And I also put a letter in there. You know what? We 50 Bahamians signed this letter. You know, underneath there, when the FNM was in power, 15 Bahamians from the Natural Resources Foundation. 49, including myself, made 50 on this list. You know, look at this list right now. And look at the names. I put it in the group, you know, so everybody could see the Natural Resources Foundation. Everybody believe, right? We speaking up about the natural resources of this country. It's about Lincoln Bay. You know, it ain't about Lincoln Bay. And I thank God for Lincoln Bay. And guess why? Because he's another Bahamian who joined the fight. So the Bahamian people could benefit from the natural resources of this country, but it's not about Lincoln Bay. Everybody taking this thing and trying to make it about Lincoln Bay. We've been fighting for the natural resources before Lincoln Bain started his fight and open up, start his fight and take it to the extent where he take it. You see what I'm saying? So I put this in here to show you all two things. That was the first one, and the next one, you all look at all these names. Who quiet now? Who telling people we ain't got no resources in Lincoln Bay lying? Look, all the Jermaine, Coakley, them, look all their names them. Look on the list there. You see? And you can see my name there too. So guess what happened, Bahamians? You all don't let these people them use their political psychology to stop your children from getting what God bless us with. All of us, and each and every Bahamian is supposed to be rich in this country. This country too rich for one Bahamian to be poor, suffering, or in need. You all spread this message around, yeah? And I put this out there so everybody could see. That's the document right there, what we draft and present it to the House of Assembly. Y'all, let's make this thing happen, you know? It's all of these political pundits who now trying to tell you all these things ain't real. When the FNM was in power, they were speaking for about the natural resources. Now that the PLP in power, they quiet. You know what they is called? They sell, they ready to sell their own children out for a bowl of porridge. Well, I am not a seller. Now I ain't gonna sell my own out for a bowl of porridge. I can fight for mine. And that's what we need to do. We need to stand up for our rights and fight Bahamas if we want to benefit from our natural resources. That's all I got.
Even Bobo Tino thinks the government is already stealing the carbon credit money.
They get the carbon print money. Something $100 billion. I ain't calling no one full name, so you can't sue me. Brave, anyone is brave. The land of the brave, every brave, I brave, you brave, brave. Get $11 billion in his personal account. Alright then, let me tell you something. These niggas pocketing all the money, bro. All the motherfucking money. Big money too. You see what I'm saying? We ain't supposed to be around here doing all kind of shit for no money. You see what I'm saying? All us supposed to have one little grand, $2 every month coming in. Why are you being gang and selling drugs if I getting $2 on air of government? I open a business, I bring in a nation to work for me. You all won't help Haiti, give us our fucking money and let us build a business them. And we can bring that shit them from Haiti. They come here and work for us, bro. On work permit, bro. You see, they won't do that. They won't pocket all the money, bro.
Another question I had is, should we trust the government and them dealing with IMF, which is also known as International Monetary Fund? I don't like the way that they're so close. And with that being said, you know, they have their own agenda at hand. You know, because the Bahamas is already in a lot of debt. Last I heard it was 7-point-something billion, so I can't say for sure, and that needs to be paid. So the way that it sounds, You know, all that lovey-dovey talk and hugging, you know, all that times is like we might not see any of those carbon credits because most of that, if not all of that, is going to be used to pay off the national debt that the Bahamas is in.
We have to find a way to unleash more financing for the Bahamas and all the countries like the Bahamas.
Going into COP27, the Bahamas government is already finding success in a new ally who reveals that a $40 million fund can be accessed by middle-income Bahamas. The International Monetary Fund and its managing director, Kristalina Georgieva, have big ambitions as the world gathers in Egypt to hold fast to the plans already made to save the planet from the supercharged rate of global warming.
Offsets, carbon credits can be a asset class for the Bahamas that helps to finance adaptation to climate shocks.
Carbon credits and other means of funding to offset the costly toll on smaller emitters who are at most risk but least responsible.
That the IMF is showing to the challenges that small and developing states like ours have, particularly with this existential threat that's upon us. And I'm grateful that she is going to look into how assist us in the monetization of our carbon credits as a new asset class. And I'm so delighted that we were able to have this meeting this afternoon to share our views, concerns, and the way forward on these things.
Prime Minister Philip Davis arrived safely in Sharm el-Sheikh, leading a mammoth-sized delegation of 70 Bahamian professionals to find their way into the pocketbooks of countries that need to now go from saying what they mean to do to doing what they say they mean.
Direction by creating first ever long-term concessional financing capacity at the IMF, exactly to support countries that are vulnerable to climate shocks.
That meeting that they've been to in Egypt, you know, we weren't inside the meeting. We don't know what they're talking about or whatever they were talking about. That don't sound like it was all about giving the Bahamian people money. That don't sound nothing like that. I ain't hear nothing about that. All I hear about is IMF getting money. That's all I heard. But what I really found funny is that my brother Cassius Stewart, he had a lot of information about this carbon credit stuff a while back on the show called Beyond the Headlines.
I think many people who are watching us don't really understand how this thing called carbon credit. What is carbon credits? It was basically started by the World Bank some time back. However, carbon credits is basically what the industrial nations have agreed to put on industries. In other words, for every 1 ton of pollution you produce, you get 1 credit. So we give you 1 carbon credit for every 1 ton. So if your company is producing 5 tons and you only have 1 credit, then you're fined for the additional 4 tons of extra pollution. That fund then is therefore what these nations who, like the Bahamas, can pull from. You understand? However, what they're also saying is that if we can create industries within the Bahamas that can also pull carbon from the atmosphere and then we can have it certified by this international agency, then if we can produce our own ton of carbons, then we will get paid for that too. So you can do it as a personal project or as a company or as a country. However, right now you're looking at carbon credits. It was $2 a ton, now it's $6 a ton. They're saying that they want it to be $76 by 2025. However, that's a little shaky. The whole issue was to punish companies that are producing excessive amount of carbon in the atmosphere. However, it has been basically, it went into this money laundering and a money grab thing for a lot of major companies, and a lot of money is floating around in carbon credits now. However, where it's supposed to be going, it's not going right now, and so this is why they're trying to basically straighten it up. So, but what they're really saying is, see, the IMF, a lot of our debt is owed to the IMF. What the IMF will say is that, okay, we will now pull money from the fund, and then we'll forgive your debt. So the money that are being fined from these major companies for the excessive amount of carbon will go to the IMF, and they'll say, okay, that's 500 million, and instead of you paying the IMF will pull money from the fund. So that's the kind of system they're trying to create. You notice that in the article they say it is difficult, it is hard, but keep pressuring us. In other words, It's not really crystallized as yet. It's not concrete as yet, but they're still trying to formulate how this can work. And so, but of course, the IMF is trying to put themselves in a position where they can get their money off the top instead of waiting for it to come from countries. And so, they're smart bunch of people. So that's how the whole system of carbon credit works. Hopefully we'll figure out how it all works for us. I mean, we don't produce that much except carbon playing the game. However, we do have issues. We can, if you're getting into solar, if you're getting into planting trees, if you could quantify that, then you could sell that as carbon credits. I think though also too, we have, I guess, we have more airplanes flying in our airspace than anywhere in the world. And I suspect that what we need to do is that all the emissions that are burned off in our airspace, we need to now go heavily after our air tax, because our space is being polluted not by us, but by airplanes flying over our airspace, burning off carbon and so on. And so that's something that we have to look at. I know right now I think the first PLP administration went and renegotiated the air tax. I think we need to go back to the drawing board, because most of the air tax is being given to the United States. So the US gets most of our air tax. Every country gets their own air tax except the Bahamas. That money goes to the United States. We only get about $5 million or so, and we could do $100 million easy every year for air tax. And so that is something we have to seriously look at. I think we need to go back to the negotiating table with the FAA and the United States government and say, listen, we want our money, we want our air tax, because we got bills to pay.
As you can see, he's able to articulate his words very well and explain it, very well. But then he went on, I don't know what's the name of the show that he went on, where he's saying that if we get $1 from that, he'll bow down. I ain't too sure if he'll commit to that or not, but because I'm in the same boat with him. I don't believe this thing, is going to come through and nothing like that, but I'm hopeful. But like I say, the Bahamas track record in terms of helping the Bahamian people, everybody else is get sorted out except us. It feels that way sometimes. So I can't say for sure what's going on in terms of us getting anything out of that deal.
I mean, how much billion they can give us?
No, it's 150.
It's a valuation.
It's a valuation that we have 156 billion per year.
Per year?
Yeah.
Per year.
Annual. Yeah, annual.
Whoa!
That's the evaluation. That's the evaluation. It's 156 billion per year.
No, it's every year.
As long as people honor this carbon credit system,
and then
that's what we could sell. That's the amount we could sell per year.
I'll be the first one to say, I'm sorry. I'll be the first one to bow down and
Can
say,
we hold you to that?
Yes, I'll be the first.
Would you want to do bow down?
If you
And
get
accept your yearly check.
If you get $1 in 2024
for carbon credits,
$1. Now I can bow down and say sorry.
The fact that the man bow down and say sorry,
if you get $1 in 2024,
I
if
guarantee
you get $1,
it ain't gonna be $1. It could be
I
800. Hold on. It could be $872 million.
I will tell you one thing. I will come on this show and personally say sorry for not believing in the carbon credit if I see something was to be given in my bank account coming from the carbon credit. I will even post the amount that I get from the carbon credit if we get anything. So I'm a cast your short on this one. I think we're getting a dime from that. Thank you for tuning in to Shorts of View. Hope you enjoyed the episode. Until the next episode.
Look here, you got to watch Shorts to View all the time, anytime, overtime, under time, between the time. Shorts to View. That's how Johnny Cake said.